Okay, folks, it's your buddy Mike Messier, Mike's Instant TV review, Hulu TV series review of a new show. I guess not that new, but 2023, and it's titled Unprisoned. So if you haven't seen this show and you happen to find my review here on One Mike Messier on YouTube, or if you're a wonderful subscriber and you just happen to see this and you're wondering what's this Unprisoned, I didn't know either. I happen to be on Hulu, and I was just digging, looking for something new to watch, and there's so many wonderful things through all these streaming devices, movies, and it's so easy to go through all these thumbnails and just get confused. But I saw Kerry Washington's lovely face, and I do consider myself a fan of hers ever since the show Scandal. Now, in full disclosure, I only watched, I believe, the first 2 seasons of Scandal. And check this out, I actually watched it on DVDs that I borrowed from the library, yes. And that was about 5 years ago, because I was taking a class with Shonda Rhimes on Masterclass. When I say take a class, Masterclass, if you don't know, or if you've heard of it and never tried it, it's this website with all these wonderful classes, and it actually is worth the money. I had it for 4 or 5 years. Shonda's class was quite good. When you say class, it's not like you're in a classroom. It's like an online thing. You do it at your own pace. Nobody's grading you. It's basically like a really better version of YouTube. Just really good videos, well produced, of people that know what they're talking about. Does taking any of those classes lead directly to career success? Maybe, maybe not. But in any event, that's how I got to know Kerry Washington, was through Scandal, because I took the Shonda Rhimes class. So that, knowing Kerry Washington and her prowess as an actress, and I really do enjoy her. In fact, if I ever got to the point where I could finance my film based on this novel, Fight or Play Basketball, that I wrote, this character, and know that young lady is just a person in the picture. But I would, the Kerry Washington actress, I would like for my story here. So I'm a fan. So I wanted to see what she's up to in this Unprisoned, and then I see good old Delroy Lindo. I feel like he's one of these guys that is one of those underrated actors. When you say underrated, who's doing the ratings? You know, it's not like you have a list of actors and they're rated, but I don't know. I feel like Delroy is so dependable, so good. I know he's done a bunch of stuff, but I feel like, you know, Delroy is just a really hard-working actor, and I don't want to say unappreciated, but maybe he's a little unappreciated. I don't know, but I just feel like Delroy is maybe overlooked at times. But I've always enjoyed his stuff. I can't name you my 10 favorite Delroy Lindo roles or anything, but I always like seeing him. And as one of the characters points out to Edwin, his character in this, you look like you haven't aged. So I saw the first 2 seasons. Now you might be catching on that I like this show. I'm just speaking positively, by the way. I'm low on sleep right now, partially to blame for this series, because I kind of binge watched it. In basically 2 days, I watched the first 2 seasons, and my sleep's all screwed up, but I wanted to just express myself. And there's one creative thing in this show that I feel is a kind of a risk that I think succeeds despite itself. And watching it, I'm kind of like, because I've taken screenwriting classes and stuff, and I'm seeing that this show is kind of doing something that a screenwriting teacher of mine once advised not to do. And the show is kind of doing that, but kind of pulling it off. So I'll get to that later. But first off, should you see the show? Should you not? Yes, I think watch the show. If you have Hulu, watch it. If you don't have Hulu, it's probably worth getting a trial, or just paying month to month to bang this out in a couple of days. Or if you're at a friend's house, or if you have an Airbnb coming up and they happen to have Hulu, I think it's worth watching. And you'll probably find, like myself, it's bingeable. And it's kind of contained. And what's also nice is that I think the new gimmick now with some of these series is like they're releasing 1 new episode every Sunday. Well, if you're new to Unprisonable like I am, all the shows that we have so far are done. They do kind of leave us on a cliffhanger at the end of season 2, which I just saw like 3 hours ago. And now I'm kind of like, God damn it, will they have a season 3? I really hope they do, because I want to see what happens. What's the story about? God, it took me a while to get there. You basically have a woman, Kerry Washington plays, I believe the name is Paige Alexander. Kind of a name that's a little familiar, like it sounds kind of like the name she had on Scandal. I can't remember what that is off the top of my head. But Paige Alexander is a therapist, professional therapist. She's raising her son, who appears to be 16 or 17 years old. I think he's a junior or a senior in high school when the show begins, because they're talking about him going to college and stuff. So she's raising him on her own. There's really not a lot of talk about the father of her kid, although her son seems to be biracial, like it just seems that way. The kid's kind of an introvert. His name is Finn. Introvert. He stays at home a lot. He plays video games a lot. He's, as far as we see in the first 2 seasons, he's really not dating any girls. He doesn't have a lot of friends. He seems like a nice enough kid, but he kind of just, like a lot of people these days, gets his human activity through the video games and so forth. Later, I guess spoiler, we discovered that he's got some type of general anxiety disorder. But really what we feel from Finn is that he's quite a good kid, and his mother's just kind of overprotective, or very overprotective, and shelters her son from the ways of the world a bit too much. She's kind of overcompensating for the lack of a father figure. We do find out, as you know, in season 2, that the father figure is a fairly famous musician who alludes to himself, the musician father, having been canceled at some point. And I don't know if he was joking or if he really did have a scandal of some kind, the character that is, that were to cancel him. But he's living, the father that we barely know until like deep into season 2, is living in basically this mansion, and he says it's not because of his well-doing, it's because of his wife, who inherited money from a potato chip company. Once upon a time, there was a potato chip company in my family, but that was many decades ago. The Blackstone Potato Chip Company, which was a Rhode Island thing. I think it's long since passed, but when I was a small child, I got to go see the potato chips getting hot. I mean, that was the best potato chip I ever had when I was 5 years old. Like a fucking factory, and the potato chips are coming right out, and I was able to put my little gritty 5-year-old hand on it and pull up a potato chip. So, in any event, I do have something in common with the character, I guess, for the potato chip lineage. Moving forth, but what's the real gimmick of this story? Why is it called Unprisoned? That brings us to Paige's father, who's been an in and out of prison type of individual. Delroy Lindo plays Edwin, or Eddie. He was born Eddie. He chose the name Edwin. Alexander is Delroy Lindo's character. This is a really great character for Delroy, and this character is kind of like a Yoda. Like, he's just, he's been in jail, but he's not ignorant to the ways of the world, and he has this street sense, and he has this sense of non-snitching, and all these good ethical things that you learn in prison or having the street life. Edwin, he did an extra 17 years in the big house because he wouldn't snitch. Now, that might be a good topic, because the daughter, she always has a reason to get angry with her father, and that's part of the metaphorical name of the show. It's literally Unprisoned. That's the term that the guidance counselor, the prison counselor Mal, uses when he's releasing, I think in the first episode of season 1, he's releasing the paperwork and everything for Edwin to get out, and he uses the term, how does it feel to be unprisoned, or this is the unprisoning process. It's pretty intense stuff. This show is labeled a comedy, but to me, you mind? It's really a dramedy. There's like drama and comedy, and I really enjoy these types of shows. There was a show called Shrill that I reviewed. I think that was also on Hulu or something, with 80 Bryant, or whatever her name is, the lady from SNL did Shrill that I liked. But I like these shows that are about contemporary times, real people, or, characters that are pretty close to the vest of real people and so forth. Terry McMillan, I believe, is listed as the writer, and I don't know if she also directs this show a lot, but Terry, if I'm thinking of the same lady, didn't she do Waiting to Exhale, 25, 30 years ago, and Stella got her groove back? Is that the same writer? And you might be thinking, well, gee whiz, Mike, why don't you just Google it? Well, fine, folks, I can't Google and be on the phone at the same time recording this wonderful review. And the other aspect of Mike's Instant Movie Reviews, in this case, Mike's Instant Hulu TV series review, is I like to come at you pretty raw, and I like to have any, thought that I might have, or is this actor this, or did this person do this? I like to just freeform, and I don't like to cross-reference the fucking facts, because this is my raw take on it, understand? So I might have some facts wrong, and you're welcome to write in the comments, oh, you got all these goddamn facts wrong. Fine, but I'm just giving you my raw opinion here, okay? Isn't that exciting? So what else? The thing with therapists creatively, and I've written screenplays, folks, if you don't know me, I've had some made, I've made some films, I've done some things. Screenplays, we've been seeing a lot of therapist characters for a long time, and I would kind of asterisk that, or put a pencil in it, and I would think that maybe not the beginnings of this trend, but kind of the origins, really got going in a year. Was it 1996 or 97, or maybe it was 98, that I think The Sopranos TV show came out. And in the same calendar year, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a movie called Analyze This with Billy Crystal and Robert De Niro. And you might have seen that movie. There was a sequel, Analyze That. But believe it or not, Analyze This and The Sopranos, by all accounts, I think they came out within 2 or 3 months of each other. Or maybe a little bit more. But I think within the same year, within 12 months, the movie Analyze This was actually pretty successful, because Robert De Niro was starting to get into comedy with the Meet the Parents movies, and then Analyze This. Billy Crystal was such a well-loved guy. Even in 98, he was kind of on the tail end of his huge run. Billy Crystal was kind of the man of the, mid-80s to like late 80s to mid to late 90s. Billy Crystal was huge. And this was kind of like one of Billy's last huge things, was working with De Niro. And Billy Crystal played the therapist to a gangster played by De Niro. And then The Sopranos was out. And The Sopranos, the first couple of seasons, were really about Tony Soprano seeing a therapist to talk about his mother issues. And unfortunately, and I think the show was never the same, in my opinion, after the first season of The Sopranos, the mother actress passed away in real life, and they had to write, they to their credit, they didn't replace her with another actress. They killed off the character too. And I do feel The Sopranos suffered from that. But the point is, that's 2 movies in 1 year where you had a gangster talking to a therapist. And we've seen this in so many movies. And I guess for me, I wrote a screenplay where there's a therapist character. And I think it's kind of a crutch, to be honest with you, at this point at least. I think at the time of The Sopranos and Analyze This, it was novel. And I wrote a stage play titled Victorious that I rewrote as Wrestling with Sanity. And at the time I had my thing on stage, it was still kind of novel or exciting. But I think therapy is just overdone now. I think as a creative thing, because it's kind of an easy go-to. It's like, if you want to have a character talk about shit, then they can, talk about it with a therapist, and all these things can happen. And if you really think about it, we could have more shows where people go to the barber, like Barbershop. That's an extreme, but you get what I'm saying. Like, you could just have friends, just not the fucking, Courtney Cox friends, but just people talking to their friends or whatever the fuck. But somehow the therapist thing has become this kind of go-to thing now, which I think is cliche. But here's what Unprisoned does that's kind of nice. Instead of a character going to the therapist in this show, the therapist is the main character. So that's kind of cool, because, I don't think we've seen a lot of the therapist, the one that's all fucked up. And in this show, eventually, Paige takes her family, Finn and her father, Edwin, and they go see another therapist played by John Stamos, which I thought was kind of interesting because when that character is introduced, I thought that the John Stamos character, I thought he was going to be playing himself, basically, like John Stamos as John Stamos, but he's actually playing a character. Sometimes these shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm pull shit like that. Like if they have a famous person, Sienna Miller was on Curb Your Enthusiasm in one of the later episodes or seasons. And the famous people, it's kind of a thing with me, it's Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's like a Goofy and Pluto thing. Like, are you famous enough on Curb Your Enthusiasm? Is your level of fame so much that you just play yourself? Or even in Vince Vaughn's case, he's playing a character, which it seems a little across the board, because I would kind of argue that Vince Vaughn, at least at one point, was a lot more famous than some of these other people like Richard Lewis, rest in peace. I like Richard Lewis, but you got to think that Vince Vaughn was more famous or successful at his peak than Richard Lewis ever was, yet Vince has to play a character, and you know, Ted Danson's playing Ted Danson. It's across the board with that show. That's what I thought we were happening here with John Stamos, but no, John Stamos plays this other character who's like an unlicensed therapist. I was going to say the term that I used for my stuff with the therapy character, but John Stamos, his character is able to dig even deeper with these folks. Also, we find out that when there's another character that's great on Unprisoned, the Nadine character, not a whole lot of characters in the TV world with that name. And she is like the love interest or the hookup buddy of Edwin. Like, and also, you know, she was raising, although it's not her child at all, and she had no legal reason to raise her, but somehow she raised young Paige for 10 years, from 8 to 18. And so many characters. And then the Mal, who's another guy, he's the prison, not the parole officer, but like kind of a job counselor guy for Edwin. Is he his parole officer? I don't think so. I think he's more like a career counselor guy. But anyway, Mal becomes a love interest to Paige, as we know. Very exciting. Who else? Then there's like some secondary characters. Edwin's got some friends, you know, that he keeps in touch with, that it's kind of like these guys on the shady side of tracks a little bit. They're his old, you know, running buddies in crime and stuff. But it's really like, I guess if you were to list the characters from top to bottom, it would be Paige, the Kerry Washington. Then like a 1A is Delroy Lindo as her dad. Then third from the top is the son, Finn. I would say fourth is probably Nadine, Delroy Lindo's, you know, kind of love interest, the pseudo stepmother. Fifth, you'd either say Mal, the love interest, or six, Esty, which is kind of like the adopted, like two girls that were raised together briefly in the foster care system, was Kerry's character Paige, and then her sister, I don't know the actress's name, but she played her like, they were both adopted by the same foster parents for a while. That gets a little confusing. That background stuff's a little shaky because Paige has a lot of antagonism towards Nadine. We find out, you know, Paige accuses Nadine of leaving her behind at a truck stop, and she was having bipolar breakdowns and was in the crime world, or, you know, some stuff like that. But Paige is kind of looking for approval. It's another theme of this show, is a lot of the characters are looking for approval. They're trying to settle old grudges. We have like these little cutaway stuff when they're like fighting or wrestling or boxing each other in these fantasy sequences. I guess I want to get to my thing here with the show, a risk that it takes creatively that seems to be working despite itself, because in a way, watching it, I'm kind of cringing on the inside, but I'm also like, it works for this show. It's a theory that I learned. I didn't come up with this theory. Give credit to a gentleman, Christopher Menzel, was a screenwriting teacher I took years ago at the University of Rhode Island in a summer class. And Christopher had this theory that he shared. I don't know if he got it from someone else, but that's where I'm getting it from, of double mojos. Well, what's a double mojo in a script or a story? Well, basically Christopher's saying, or he said at the time, you could have a script where there's a talking basketball and that would be like a funny, talking basketball movie. Like the basketball itself is talking, right? But then you could have a ghost movie where there's a ghost. But if you put a ghost and a talking basketball in the same movie, the audience would bail. So you could have a talking basketball and the audience will buy into it. Oh, cool, the talking basketball movie. You could have a ghost movie. Oh shit, it's a ghost. But if you hammer fucked the ghost and the talking basketball together, you're going to lose the audience. They're not going to buy it. This show, Unprisoned, I feel, and it's not just an example of a talking basketball and a ghost. You could have a bunch of different things. But basically, one fantasy or one magical or one hyper reality, whatever you want to call it, something outside the grid of normalcy. You could have one of those, but that's all you get. Because if you start super chunking them all together, the audience kind of rejects the whole thing, right? So in this show, I kind of feel like they're doing some double mojos, and I'll tell you what but once again, the show seems to be working. You have what I do like, which is Kerry, Paige, Alexander, pretty early on in the series, starts talking to little Paige. It's her inner child. It's an actress, a young actress who I think is great. Whoever this kid actress is, she's got to be 10 years old or younger or whatever, but I think she's fantastic, the little kid actor, because she's using very adult dialogue and stuff, because she kind of has the benefits of both being, a child and an adult at the same time, because it's a fantasy inner voice child that's personified by this young actress. And of course, only Paige can see her. Later, Paige sees her father's inner child and gives him a big hug. So she sees her own father's inner child. Edwin doesn't see his own inner child. I was kind of waiting for Finn, her son, like his 5-year-old self, to come crawling out, but he never did. It'd be kind of fun to see, Nadine's inner child, Estee's inner child. But so far, it's just been, Paige and her dad's. But I like these child actor routines. That's kind of cool, right? But I do, because the whole thing with therapy is you have to love your inner child. That's the whole thing. Then we also have what I don't like so much, but it does kind of work but this whole thing with like kind of what I'm doing now, Paige is always talking to her fucking phone because she's a YouTuber or an Instagrammer who feels the need to basically share all her shit with her followers. And it's not said that she's like a super elite, Jake Paul, what's his dick, Mr. Beast type of a YouTuber or whatever the fucker, but she's good enough to have some attention on her, and she gets to do a TED Talk and so forth. But in any regard, to me, that's like a technique, and the inner child thing's a technique that are kind of stepping on each other's toes. And here's another character, which I'm going to label the sounding board, which is someone has to listen to Paige talk with all her deepest thoughts, and that's Esty, the sister character. So we kind of have, in my opinion, a triple mojo, because we have three things. The inner child scenes. See, this is the good part of this fucking video. Everything else was kind of leading up to this. But we have the inner child scenes. We have the fucking Instagram where she's talking direct to the camera, on her live feed. And then we have the fucking, we have the sister, right? And they're all serving the same purpose, which is Paige gets to talk. Now, the reason why I think this works on this show, it's obviously working because of good writing, right? But I think it's really working because of the casting. I think with lesser actors or actresses, or both, it couldn't be pulled off, even with the same script. Because I think Kerry Washington is really so likable, even in her anxiety. Like, she's like, all her traits that are kind of acknowledged by the show, she's kind of waspy, she's kind of annoying, she overthinks, she overanalyzes. But because Kerry Washington is so lovable as an actress, we kind of tolerate it, like, at least I do. Like, we don't kind of bail on the show. And because the show, other characters call her character out, we're still in the part of this. At least I was, for 2 days, right? Watching this thing, which I don't really do that a whole lot. I'm not a huge binge watch guy, but with this I was. So that tells you something. It tells you it's a good show. No mystery. But basically, that's my big reveal. Like if you look at this show, if you've already seen it and you didn't notice this, just think what I'm saying about double mojos. Like, I think, I'm trying to think of some example. I mean, I think that's kind of maybe what turned me off to Game of Thrones. Like, I watched the first season. I really didn't get into it. Yes, you have dragons and you have this and you have that. And I get it. Like, the fantasy world or the fantasy genre is kind of exempt from this double mojos because it's fantasy. But like a different type of story, I'm trying to think of other examples where like they have the double mojo things. I think a lot of the successful stuff don't have the double mojos. Like the Talking Baby movies from 10 or 15 years ago, actually more like 30 or 40 fucking years ago. Look Who's Talking. You have the Talking Baby, Bruce Willis. I think by the time they got to like, and I never saw the third one or whatever the one was, the Talking Dogs, Look Who's Talking Now. I think people bailed because they're like, hey, we were with you for Talking Babies. We'll do Talking Babies, but now we got Talking Babies and Talking Dogs. And I think people just had enough of it. But there's other examples that you can find where it's just like too much double mojos, too many mojos. I worked on a screenplay once. It was a horror script and it had like, fucking stuffed, like basically like Chucky type of stuff, like, Chucky type of stuff, and then flashbacks to a murder and this type of shit. And the whole script had to be cleaned up. And the biggest issue was, double fucking mojos. And then of course I cleaned up the script and made it beautiful. And then the fucking director puts in a fucking puppet scene. So, I mean, as a writer, you do what you can, but people will find a way to fuck you in the asshole creatively if they can. And they do. So anyway, what else can I say about this show? I mean, I enjoyed it. I mean, okay. Some of the characters, I feel like I did take a little peek at IMDb to get some of these. It's hot as fuck, by the way. That's why I'm sweating now. Brenda Strong is the actress that plays Nadine. Apparently she was on Desperate Housewives, another show I didn't really watch. I'm aware that it exists. I saw a scene or two, but I never sat there and watched it. Okay. But she's very good in this. The kid that plays Finn, I think, is good. I think he's very on point as far as a modern kid who's kind of quiet and, he doesn't have this male role model. And so it just kind of reads in the way he deals with life. What else? Was there anything that I thought that, at least in this season 2, and I watched them all basically together, but the father of Finn is just kind of crammed in there real quick. I would say, if anything, this show really does a good example of like every single dysfunctional fucking family thing you could have, like the foster kids or my daddy went to prison or whatever the fuck. Like, everyone's got something here. It would be nice via contrast, and maybe, I don't know if Mal's character is like that, but just like a character whose parents are just married and somewhat happy. You know what I mean? I'm not sure if they said that about Mal, the boyfriend slash guy, prison guy or whatever the fuck. There are some little, I don't know if I'd call them flaws, but you can see where this show financially, saves some money. For instance, there's a scene where Edwin drives the car and he doesn't have a license yet, and he's driving his grandson home. And we see like the sirens of the police car, and then he's telling his grandson, put your hands on the, because the whole thing with the mom is she wants her son to not get caught up in the crime life that her father did. So she overly protects her son, raising him like a veal so he doesn't go down the path of his grandfather. I do feel like we were kind of robbed of that. The police pull the fucking Edwin and Finn over because that's a highly dramatic scene. And then, yes, 4 years removed from the George Floyd situation, murder, death, whatever you want to call it, dying, arrest. Yes, all these things we know now. But I mean, I do feel like that's a real dramatic moment. And are they trying to just stay in the comedy realm? But I mean, like I said, I consider this a dramedy myself, I just feel like they kind of robbed us of some real stuff there. Like what the fuck happened, you know, when Edwin got arrested, and they talk about it later, but we don't see it. Or there was another scene earlier than that when Edwin drives illegally from Alabama back to Minneapolis. That's another thing I got to talk about. Why don't we see like Edwin cruising? Like, that sounds like a fun thing. Like, he's obviously got to be careful because he's driving illegally through several states, and they say he drove 1,500 miles in 12 hours. But I think we could have had a nice montage of him like driving and enjoying his freedom, and they just didn't show that. You know, like I'm saying, like, I think some of these scenes that I would have liked to have seen maybe a little expensive, but what the fuck, right? We're making a goddamn series here. Let's not hold back. There's some mentions to, I'm just hot as a fuck right now. I gotta roll up this window. Jesus God. Hopefully the video doesn't cut off, but it might. Anyway, if it cuts off, the series is good. But I just didn't like how it seemed like, I just gotta say this thing. Like, it's the Prince stuff in Minneapolis. They talk about Prince. They talk about this show taking place in Minneapolis. But I feel like we're in Anytown, USA. Anyway, folks, I'm so fucking hot now. I've suffered for this video. It's a good series. If you've watched it, leave a comment. I'm sure there's some wonderful, insightful thing I'm forgetting right now, but I feel like the proverbial dog that's been locked in the hot goddamn car. So subscribe to this channel, One Mike Messier, for Mike's Instant Movie Reviews. My films are One Man and a Camera Films YouTube channel. My beautiful artwork is on One Artist Mike Messier, and my pro wrestling and sports stuff is on One Pro Wrestling and Sports Fan YouTube channel. You're saying, well, gee whiz, Mike, you've told us so many things. Can't you give us one resting spot to see all your things? Where can we buy your wonderful novel? Where can we do this? Where can we stand you on social? Go to MikeMessier.com and just scroll to the bottom, and all that stand me on social shit. My books is all there. But I give a little tiny applause to Terry McMillan and Associates, Kerry Washington, Delroy Lindo, the lady who played Kim or Brenda. Very good show. I'm enjoying it. What do you think, fine folks?